Hey gang, I'm back in the shop today and I'm getting ready to convert this 1997 Road King from a Magneti Marelli fuel injection system over to a carburetor. And I'm starting to assemble all my parts and get my plan together. So let me show you what I'm going to do. Okay, first things first, I've got the fuel tank off the bike and drained, and I removed the top cover, and I'm gonna have to pull the guts out of this thing, take out the fuel pump and the hoses, and then install some plugs, well, a plug and then a fitting for the Pingel fuel valve. So that's the first part, and I am going to break this into three parts, so number one is going to be the fuel tank. Okay, second and most obvious is getting the fuel injection throttle body, if you want to call it that, out of the bike so I can put in the new manifold and carburetor setup. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to have to deal with this wiring mess for the injection system, and I do plan to get rid of anything that is not needed, including the ECM and all of these inputs and outputs going to the ECM and that are on the injection system. And luckily the Harley wiring diagram shows both setups. It shows it for the fuel injected system as well as the carbureted system. And the really nice thing is this connector that goes to the main harness, all of the wire colors are the same on the carbureted harness as they are on the injected harness. And there are a couple extra wires here that are populated on the injected side that are not needed on the carbureted harness. So those will be removed, and the plan is to save the lengths of these wires so I have enough to connect up to the ignition system. I ended up going with a Dyna 2000, and it's got this stock style Deutsch connector. It's got a couple extra wires here for I guess the single fire or the dual fire coil. So I'll get the wiring diagram for this, but the idea is I'm going to get rid of anything that is not needed from this harness and completely convert it over to the carbureted harness. So that's the plan. Stay tuned. Okay, I want to show something here. I've got the ECM off of the mounting plate. I guess it's on the battery box, and with these two screws the ECM does come off, but I took a couple screws off of the battery box here so I could lower it down and get enough room to pull the power commander through there, because that power commander is hardwired into the ECM. You can see it right there. So I've got the whole ECM out of there, the power commander, and now I think I can put the battery box back up into its original position. I probably will mount the Dynatech or the Dyna 2000 ignition over here. On some of the Harleys I've seen it mounted up here, so we'll see where the best location for that is, but want to show you just in 10 minutes I've got the ECM out of there, and now I can start working my way through the rest of this wiring. Okay, again, I want to emphasize it is super easy to get all of this wiring out of here. and I just want to give a few tips. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get that ECM out of there, and that is mounted up here on the battery box. You may have to take the 2 bolts out that hold the battery box in place and pull that down so you can get the if you do have a power commander set up, you can get the power commander through there, through this slot right here. And then the rest of the wiring, some of these things are connected up on the battery box on some little tabs. I'm sorry, on the panel for the ECU. There's some tabs where some of these connectors go, and you can remove the barometric sensor. And then once you have all of that out of the way, there's a couple of relays that go up in this slot on the battery box. You just pull those down through there, take the connectors off, and you can pull the connectors through the openings around the battery box. And then lastly, this part of the harness goes up along the frame, and this connector here is actually for the fuel pump, and this red wire goes to the main power distribution, which is right down there. It gets connected on this bolt, and like I said, the harness goes up along the frame, and then once you disconnect everything from the throttle body, the injectors, the idle control motor, and from your coil, and also from the temperature sensor in the head, you'll have to pull that one out. But all of this will pull down through, and you'll be able to pull it down through the frame and through this opening by the battery box. So everything is contained in that harness. Again, I am going to save this harness. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to butcher it up to be able to reuse this connector. I could go out and buy a new one, but why should I do that when I've got one right here? Unless I wanted to try to sell this harness. But anyway, I'll salvage the wires out of it, and just wanted to show you how super easy that was to get out of there. Actually, one other connection here is for the crankshaft position sensor. You may or may not use that if you have a type of an ignition that goes off the crank position sensor, or if you're going to use the cam position sensor, which is the route that I'm going to take. Hopefully that will work for me. But again, super easy. I don't know why. All right, just a couple things before I get too far here on getting the throttle body and injection out of there. You will have to remove your horn bracket and take your horn out of there. This is the upper motor mount, and this bracket, you know, I guess you don't necessarily have to take it out of there, but well, actually I do, because there is another bracket that gets mounted to this for the choke cable, and it is different than this one. It actually has 3 holes in it. I am going to modify this bracket and just tack on an extra piece of metal on the back there and put a couple holes through it so I can put that bracket on there. So that's really why I'm removing this. I don't know that you necessarily have to remove it to get the throttle body out, but it certainly helps to get this stuff out of the way. So that's that's why I'm doing that. You know, you can get at your bolts for your intake manifold. You're going to want to save your clamps for the seals, and make sure that those are in good condition and not warped. Hopefully these aren't warped, and I'll try to save them. Even if they are, I've got a press. I might be able to get them tweaked back into shape. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at here. And on the other side, obviously, you know, you're going to have to get your breather bolts out of here, and the last thing would be the throttle cables, and hopefully I can do that without taking the whole air filter, air cleaner assembly all apart. We'll see, but I don't want to go into too much detail on this because there's plenty of videos out there on how to install an intake manifold and all of that stuff. I'm just going to show you when I've got the carburetor and the intake on there. I might take a little bit of a vid as I'm going through that process. Okay, another shot here of the Magneti Marelli system. I've got the entire system out of here, including the ECU, the coil, relays, the complete wiring harness, and then of course the throttle body. So bye-bye Magneti Marelli. Okay, I just wanted to show a little bit of progress here. I got the intake manifold all bolted down, and there's some other good videos on how to install that intake manifold. And I've got the carburetor all mounted up, and the stock throttle cables, those worked. They are a little bit loose on the adjustment. It seems like they're a little bit long, although these are aftermarket braided cables, but the throttle does work. So kind of at the end of my adjustment, I wish it would snap back a little bit better. I may have to lube the throttle. And obviously here I've got the intake and breather all mounted up there. Let's see, turned out my air idle screw 1.5 turns, and I've got the choke cable fed through there, so I just have to put my new bracket and get that VOES sensor mounted up there and the choke cable, and then she's going to be ready for wiring. So pretty much got all the mechanical stuff on there for the carburetor, and we'll continue here with progress. Okay, I had a little bit of luck here. I drilled down through the center, and this thing came out of there. So I'm going to do the same thing on the back, and we'll see how that goes. Ultimately, I'd like to get those fuel lines out of inside the tank, but they're looks like they're spot welded in there, so we'll see. Okay, finally making a little progress here. I've got this hole all the way through, and first I went in with my step drill and got the brass out of there, and now I'm going in with a 5/8 drill, and that's got the hole pretty much where I want it. So I'm going to do both of those. I did get one line out of the inside of the tank. I had to cut the bracket out and just break the line off. The other one should come out when I drill this, but I'm probably gonna have to cut it or break it because it is spot welded on the inside of the tank. Okay guys, I'm getting ready to button up this carburetor swap on this 1997 Road King. Converted it from the Magneti Marelli to a HSR 42 style carburetor. It is not a Mikuni, it is a copy. So did go with the Mikuni breather setup, and I installed a stock type ignition module. However, it is a Dyna 2000, and you can see here I've got it mounted. I did manage to get a carbureted wiring harness for this thing. It was less than $30, so I figured it'd save me the hassle of getting the Deutsch connectors and trying to make a harness myself. I was lucky enough to find one on eBay. So I am getting ready to button this thing up here, just putting the tank back on. And I installed my Pingel adapter kit and the fuel valve, and you can see I've got some extra hose hanging here. I'm just getting ready to cut that. I had the spark plugs out. I set the static timing on the ignition module, which was pretty easy setup. I will try to go back and set the timing on the bike after everything is running. And static timing setup was pretty easy, so hopefully that's gets me close enough, so we'll see on that. Okay, other than that, just getting ready to button up this fuel tank, get the line connected, and put some fuel in there and see if I can fire this thing up. Okay, just a little update here on the Magneti Marelli carburetor conversion, and got all my ignition and everything wired up, the new wiring harness, carburetor's all in there, and I was getting fuel, getting spark, but the bike would not fire, and ended up pulling the plugs, testing the compression, everything there looked good, and turns out that I've got an issue with the cup that is used for the cam pickup sensor here. This cup happens to be for the electronic fuel injection, and there's another cup for the carbureted version. So these are the part numbers here. The FLHR takes a 32402-83, and that is the cup that I have put on order. The existing cup in there is a 32456-95, and I'm thinking that that will not work with my application. I did check with Harley Davidson, and the pickup sensor is the same for both models, the fuel injected and the carbureted. So I'm hoping that swapping out this cup is going to solve my problem, and I expect when I do the static timing on it with the new cup, this thing is going to fire right up, but we will see.